Nora Bell had 3 coins on Hiram Dodd's counter and a spool of wax thread 6 inches beyond her reach when the shopkeeper laughed loud enough for every customer in Alder Fork to hear. What he did not see was Caleb Mercer standing behind the feed sacks. Dodd tapped his account pencil against the counter. 3 cents short. I can see that. Nora kept her eyes on the spool. 2 ranch wives had stopped near the fabric shelves. A boy carrying meal stood beside the door. Dodd leaned on the counter. You sewing canvas now? I repair whatever pays. With what money? A few people smiled. Nora looked at her faded cuff. Poor clothing made some people think they had purchased the right to ask questions. I need the thread, Mr. Dodd. And I need full payment. He pushed the spool farther back. Nora gathered her coins. I'll come back. Dodd laughed again. Wouldn't want all this mountain commerce collapsing for lack of your needle. Nora turned. Behind the feed sacks, a tall man in a brown work coat shifted just enough for her to notice him. Caleb Mercer. His freight wagons climbed toward the ranches beyond Grayback Ridge every week. He was 38, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, his face browned by mountain weather. His eyes were on her. Nora walked out. She sat on an empty crate beside the mercantile wall and opened the canvas bundle in her lap. A torn flour sack needed a new corner before its owner would pay her. Without the wax thread, she doubled ordinary cotton, rubbed it against a scrap of candle wax from her sewing tin, and threaded the needle. You always make your own supplies? Caleb stood 3 steps away. When I have to. I can buy that spool. No. That quick? Yes. I wasn't offering charity. You said buy. That sounds like charity. His mouth moved slightly. Fair point. Nora pulled the doubled thread tight. The repair puckered. She cut it loose. Caleb watched her hands. I've got 3 freight covers at Grayback my men say are finished. Then they're finished. I don't believe them. That sounds like your problem. It could be paid work. Nora looked up. 3 covers, he said. Make them usable by sundown tomorrow and I'll pay for each one that holds. How much? He named a price. Nora shook her head. That buys patched cloth, not judgment. What buys judgment? She named her price. Done. Nothing if one fails after you test it. Caleb frowned. Half. No, it's my work. He nodded toward the north road. Grayback Yard. 1.5 miles past the sawmill. Tomorrow? Today. By noon, Nora stood inside Grayback's open-sided freight shed, staring at 3 brown canvas covers across a plank table. Caleb had not exaggerated. One had a 4-foot split along a center seam. Another carried 3 rough patches. The third had been repaired so often the cloth pulled crooked when she stretched it flat. She ran her fingers along a stitched ridge. Who did this? Different men. They sew like they're angry at cloth. A freight hand laughed outside. Caleb did not. Can you fix them? Maybe. That doesn't sound expensive. It will. Nora took out white chalk and marked the first seam. This repair sends water inward. It closes the tear. It closes the tear and builds a gutter. She cut several inches of stitching loose. Caleb stepped forward. That canvas costs more than you think. I know what canvas costs. Then why cut good thread? Because it's holding a bad seam. His voice hardened. I hired you to repair it. Nora put down the knife. You hired my judgment. If you want someone to copy what your men did, call one of them back. The shed went quiet. Caleb looked at the open seam. What would you do instead? Change the overlap. Move the stitch line. Stop forcing water toward the wagon bed. He pulled over a stool. Show me. By late afternoon, clipped thread and canvas scraps covered the floor. Nora made 6 small test squares from damaged pieces and stitched a different seam into each. She numbered them with white chalk. Caleb carried in 2 buckets. You planning to drown them? I'm planning to find out which one lies. They stretched the squares over crates. The first leaked quickly. So did the second. The third held until Caleb pressed near the fold. The fourth seeped at a corner. The fifth failed where the old cloth had weakened. The sixth stayed dry. Nora touched its chalk mark. There. That enough? Not yet. You enjoy making work harder? I enjoy not doing it twice. They repaired the first full cover using the sixth pattern, then the second. By sunset, all three were finished. Caleb tested them with water, weight, and repeated folding. None leaked. Nora's shoulders burned and her fingertips were sore. Caleb counted coins into her palm. Exactly the agreed amount. No deduction. No speech. Thank you, Nora said. You earned it. Hoofbeats entered the yard. A young rider dismounted beside the office and handed Caleb a folded route slip. Caleb read it once. Then he walked to the board beside the shed entrance. 6 customer names were written there in pencil. He erased one, then another. Nora watched the gray dust fall. What happened? Dodd happened. Caleb set down the eraser. 2 ranches took his winter credit. His carrier gets their freight now. Nora looked at the 3 repaired covers drying beneath the roof. She had fixed Caleb Mercer's canvas, and for one short hour she had believed that skill might be enough. But beneath 2 newly empty spaces on his route board, she understood that torn cloth was not what threatened Grayback Freight. By sunrise, Nora had moved the 6 chalk-marked test squares to the wall above her work table. 5 showed where the stitching had failed. 1 showed where it had held. Caleb stood beneath them with his route book open. Rain by afternoon, he said. Nora looked toward the open freight yard. Clouds were gathering above Grayback Ridge, flat and dark against the morning light. Then those covers leave inspected. They leave at 8. Then they leave after I inspect them. Caleb glanced at the yard. 2 wagons were already loaded. Men tightened ropes around flour barrels and stacked wooden crates beneath the repaired canvas. We lose time, we lose daylight. We lose a cover, you lose freight. Caleb closed the route book. How long? 20 minutes per wagon. 10. 15. He nodded. 15. Nora expected that to be the end of it. It was not. An hour later, she found Caleb inside the freight office, rewriting the departure board. He had moved the first wagon back 15 minutes. The second had been shifted 20. A third load had been moved to the following morning. Nora stood in the doorway. What are you doing? Making room. For me? For the inspections. That's not what we agreed. Caleb looked up. You said you needed time. I said 15 minutes. 1 wagon arrived late. So you changed the whole board. Seems easier than arguing with a clock. Nora crossed her arms. I don't need you rearranging your business around me. His expression tightened. It's already arranged around weather, horses, broken wheels, drivers, and customers who change their minds after the wagons are loaded. That's different. How? Those things belong to the work. So do you. The words landed harder than Caleb seemed to intend. Nora looked at him. He looked back. Then he pulled the pencil from behind his ear and held it out. Fine. What? You don't like the schedule. Fix it. She stared at the pencil. You mean that? I wouldn't hand it over if I didn't. Nora took it. She erased 3 departure times. Instead of inspecting wagons after they were fully loaded, she moved the canvas checks earlier, while the drivers were still arranging cargo. By the time the first team rolled from the yard, Nora had cut 20 minutes from Caleb's revised schedule. He watched the wagon disappear toward the mountain road. You've done freight work before. No. Then how'd you see that? I've worked for people who wasted time. That include me? She handed back the pencil. It did this morning. The corner of his mouth moved. Fair enough. The rain began before noon. At first it struck the freight shed roof in scattered drops. Then the sound thickened. Water ran from the eaves in silver lines. Nora stood near the open door, watching the road disappear beneath the gray curtain. The repaired wagons were somewhere beyond the lower ridge. Caleb sat at the office desk. He had rewritten the same line in his route book 3 times. You'll wear through the paper, Nora said. He stopped. Road gets slick above Pine Turn. Your drivers know it? They know it. Then rewriting their names won't help. Caleb laid the pencil down. Nora returned to her work table. A damaged side curtain waited beneath her hands, but she had already stitched the same section twice without noticing. Caleb noticed. He said nothing. The rain continued through the afternoon. Near dusk, they heard wagon wheels outside. Caleb was through the door before Nora had set down her needle. The first team came into the yard under a sheet of rain. The driver climbed down. Loads dry. Caleb reached for the canvas edge. Nora caught his wrist. Not yet. He looked at her. Why? Let them open it. 2 ranchers had ridden down with the wagon to inspect their autumn supplies. Nora wanted them to see the result themselves. The driver loosened the ropes. They pulled back the cover. Flour sacks sat clean and dry beneath it. So did the seed boxes stacked near the rear. One rancher pressed his hand against the canvas seam. Not wet underneath. No, Nora said. The second wagon arrived 20 minutes later. Its load was dry too. By the time the rain weakened, 4 people were standing inside the freight shed, examining Nora's repairs. A rancher named Wallace Pike pointed toward the chalked test squares. You make those? I test those. What's the difference? The test pieces are where I'm allowed to be wrong. Pike laughed. That might be the smartest thing I heard all month. Caleb leaned against the doorframe. Don't encourage her. Nora looked over. You hired me. Still questioning that decision. She could tell by his face he was not. The next morning brought 3 new freight requests. One came from Pike. Another from a ranch east of Miller Creek. The third came from a family that had used Dodd's preferred carrier for 4 years. Caleb pinned the names to the route board. For the first time since Nora arrived, there were more names going up than coming down. At supper, Caleb placed a plate beside her work table. Cold beef, bread, an apple. You forgot to eat. I didn't forget. You've been sitting here 6 hours. I noticed. He looked at her hands. You count every scrap before you cut it. Canvas costs money. So does bread. Nora glanced at the plate. You planning to charge me? No. Then I'll pay for my meals. Caleb exhaled through his nose. Everything doesn't have to become a debt. Sometimes it does. He studied her for a moment. Who taught you that? Nora threaded her needle. People who said payment could wait. Caleb did not ask for names. That helped. He pushed the plate closer. Eat first. Argue about accounting tomorrow. Nora ate. The next 2 days were the busiest Grayback had seen all season. Then Hiram Dodd answered. Caleb discovered it through cancellations. 1. Then another. Then 3 in a single afternoon. The ranchers were not angry. They were embarrassed. Dodd had offered 6 months of store credit for flour, kerosene, tools, seed, and winter staples. There was one condition. They had to use his contracted freight line. Those who stayed with Caleb would settle their mercantile accounts immediately. By evening, Caleb's route board looked worse than it had before the rain. Nora stood beneath it. The covers worked. Too well, maybe. He's scared. Caleb shook his head. Dodd isn't scared. He's rich. Rich men can be scared. Of what? Nora looked past him toward the freight shed, where 3 ranchers had spent yesterday admiring dry flour sacks beneath her repaired canvas. Then she looked again at the erased names. Every rancher had gone to Dodd separately. Everyone had faced the same choice alone. Take his terms or find money they did not have. Nora picked up Caleb's route pencil. Instead of writing a name, she drew 6 short lines beside one empty wagon slot. Caleb watched her. What's that? Your problem. That clears things up. No, Dodd's strength. She tapped the 6 lines. He doesn't own the mountain. Caleb waited. He owns the moment each family walks into his store alone. Nora looked at the half-empty route board, and for the first time, She understood exactly where to cut. Nora spent half the night turning Caleb's route board into something he had never used before. Not a list of customers. A shared load. By morning, 6 ranch names sat beneath one wagon line, each with a small number beside it. Caleb stood in front of the board with coffee in one hand. What am I looking at? 6 families paying for one wagon. That wagon stops 6 times. Yes. 6 invoices. Yes. 6 chances somebody isn't ready when the driver arrives. Nora tied back her sleeves. You wanted a solution. I wanted one that doesn't kill the driver. It won't. Caleb looked at the board again. Dodd gives them credit, because they each walk into his store alone. And, together, they buy less from him at one time. They pay before the wagon leaves. You collect your freight charge before the wheels move. Caleb rubbed a thumb across the rim of his cup. Small loads don't pay like large ones. 6 small ones might. Might. Nora opened the cloth purse at her belt. I have money saved. Caleb's eyes moved to it. No, you haven't heard the offer. I heard enough. It isn't charity. Still no. Nora set the purse on the table. It's reserve money for material. Written terms. You repay it from freight revenue. Caleb pushed it back toward her. You came here with 3 coins. I have more now. Because you earned them. That gives me the right to use them. Not to keep my business alive. Nora's chin lifted. And what exactly have I been doing for 3 weeks? Caleb's answer came slowly, making it better. Then stop deciding which risks belong to me. He stared at her. For a moment she thought they had finally reached the wall neither of them would cross. Then Caleb pulled the route pencil from behind his ear. 1 test run. Nora's shoulders loosened. You keep your money. She started to object. 1 run, he repeated. You control packing order and canvas. I control the wagon and driver. Nora held out her hand. Agreed. They shook. The first pooled load arrived before noon. It was worse than Nora expected. Mrs. Pike needed 2 sacks of flour, lamp oil, and stove bolts. The Miller place had seed grain and a crate of medicine. A ranch farther up Grayback needed a replacement pump handle, salt, and coffee. 3 more families had smaller bundles. By the time everything was stacked, the wagon looked like a badly built wall. Nora walked around it twice. This won't work. Caleb leaned against the wheel. That was fast. Not the idea. The cover. She climbed onto the wagon bed. If they open the whole canvas at every stop, rain gets into everything behind the delivery. Caleb looked toward the ridge. Clouds were gathering again. So? Nora jumped down. So I need sections. With what canvas? She looked at the scrap pile. Whatever isn't dead yet. For 3 hours, Nora cut narrow panels from damaged covers. She overlapped them like roof shingles, each one able to lift without exposing the rest of the wagon. The first arrangement sagged. She pulled it apart. The second left a gap near the center rope. She marked the mistake with chalk. The third sat flat. Caleb held the final panel while Nora stitched. You know, he said, most people hide the mistakes. Then they repeat them. Your wall looks like a graveyard. Nora glanced at the failed test squares hanging above them. No, graveyards stay finished. The wagon left shortly before sunset. It returned the next afternoon. The driver climbed down smiling. 6 stops, nothing wet. Caleb opened the first rear section. Dry. Then the next. Dry again. Nora pressed 2 fingers against the inner seam. No moisture. Caleb looked at her. She tried not to smile. Failed. By the end of the week, 4 more ranches wanted space on pooled runs. 4 ranches. Grayback's yard changed. Small orders arrived labeled by destination. Drivers stopped complaining about sectional covers once they realized they no longer had to untie an entire load at every ranch. Nora began keeping a separate chalkboard for packing order. Caleb began using it without asking. One afternoon, Nora returned from town carrying a paper parcel of needles, and found Caleb explaining the system to a driver. "Put our Miller load forward," he said. "It comes off second." Nora stopped. Caleb noticed her. "What?" "You said our load." He looked toward the wagon. "Did I?" "Yes. Must be tired." Nora went back to her table before he could see her smile. 2 days later, another offer arrived. Mrs. Fallon, who ran the boarding house in Alder Fork, needed someone to repair linens, winter coats, and curtains through March. Steady work, indoor work, guaranteed money. Nora read the offer twice. Caleb was repairing a wagon brake near the shed. Mrs. Fallon offered me winter sewing. He kept working. "That good?" "Steady. You should think on it." Nora waited. He tightened a bolt. "That all?" "What else?" "I don't know." Caleb finally looked up. "If it gives you the life you want, take it." Something in Nora's chest pulled tighter. He could have asked her to stay. Part of her had wanted him to. Instead, he handed the choice back. That mattered more. The first hard frost arrived 3 mornings later. Canvas cracked when folded too sharply. Water froze in the trough. Nora could see her breath inside the freight shed. Caleb entered carrying the route book. "We've got trouble." He spread the pages across her table. One wealthy mining supplier had offered enough money for a final full freight contract to carry Grayback through winter. Nora looked at the number. "That saves you." "Probably. What's the trouble?" Caleb pointed toward the yard. 6 prepaid ranch loads waited under temporary covers. Nora understood. They had enough strong canvas left for one choice. Protect the wealthy contract properly, or divide the best material among the pooled wagons. Hoofbeats sounded outside. Hiram Dodd rode into the yard wearing a heavy black coat. He dismounted slowly. Caleb walked out to meet him. Dodd did not bother looking at Nora. "Heard you're short on canvas." Caleb said nothing. "I've got 2 new rolls." Dodd smiled. "Enough for every wagon you own. What do you want?" "Exclusive booking through my store until spring." Nora watched Caleb's face. 5 weeks ago, he might have considered it. Now he shook his head. "No." Dodd's smile disappeared. "You'll lose the route. Maybe. You'll lose more than that." Caleb stepped back. "Then I'll lose it myself." Dodd mounted and rode away. That night, the temperature dropped again. Nora stood beneath the hanging test squares while Caleb studied the waiting wagons. At dawn, they would have to choose. 1 safe contract, or 6 families depending on a system they had built together. And there was not enough good canvas for both. The Grayback Freight Yard was moving before sunrise. 6 pooled wagons stood beneath the shed roof, each loaded and labeled. Across the yard, the wealthy mining supplier's freight waited under temporary covers. Caleb stood between them with the route book open. Nora came from the workshop, carrying the final roll of strong canvas. He looked at it, then at her. "I'll make the decision." "Why?" "My business bears the loss." Nora set the roll across the work table. "My stitching bears my name. That isn't the same. It is to me." Caleb closed the book. Cold wind pushed through the shed. Above Nora's table, the chalk-marked test squares moved gently against the wall. 5 failures. 1 design that had survived every test. Nora pointed toward the 6 pooled wagons. "They paid before we loaded." "I know. They trusted the system." "I know that too." "The mining contract gives you enough money to carry Grayback through winter." "Probably." "And if we take it?" Caleb looked toward the smaller loads. "We refund those families." "And next spring?" "They may come back." Nora shook her head. "They'll know we left them the first time a richer customer appeared." Caleb's eyes settled on her. That wealthy load could save this place. Or it could save the same business you were already losing. He said nothing. Nora stepped closer to the canvas. "The pooled route is different. It works because those families don't have to stand alone in Dodd's store. And if the covers fail? Then my design failed." "Our design." Nora stopped. Caleb seemed to hear the word after he said it. He did not take it back. Nora reached for her chalk. Then we decide together. Caleb looked at the route book one final time. He shut it. 6 wagons. They worked without further argument. Nora measured the canvas into sections while Caleb marked the strongest wagons for the longest climbs. There was not enough new material to cover every inch, so Nora used the best cloth where water collected hardest and reinforced the lower sections with older canvas. Each overlap followed the 6th test pattern. Every corner was checked twice. Caleb's drivers tightened ropes, while Nora walked from wagon to wagon pulling at seams and inspecting folds. Near 8 o'clock, the mining supplier's representative arrived. He stood beside the uncovered freight. "You taking our load or not?" Caleb looked at Nora. Then he faced the man. "Not today. You understand what this contract pays?" "Yes. My company won't offer it twice. I understand that too." The representative climbed back onto his horse. Nora watched him ride away. "That hurt?" Caleb picked up a coil of rope. "Ask me in February." The first pooled wagon rolled out. Then the second. By 9, all 6 were climbing toward Grayback Ridge. Cold rain began before noon. Nora stood beneath the shed roof, listening to it strike the empty wagon bays. Caleb sat at his desk with the route book closed. For once, he did not rewrite anything. "You're not changing the schedule?" Nora asked. Nothing left to change. The rain turned thin and sharp by afternoon. Higher on the mountain, it would be snow. They worked because waiting did nothing useful. Nora repaired harness covers. Caleb replaced a broken loading rail. Neither mentioned the wagons. The first returned shortly before dark. Mud covered the wheels. The driver climbed down. Delivered Pike, Miller, and Henderson. Nora crossed the yard. Canvas? Held. Caleb did not smile yet. Other wagons? Behind me. The second arrived 20 minutes later. Then another. One driver reported sleet near Pine Turn. Another had taken almost an hour longer because a muddy grade forced him to slow the team. But the loads had arrived. Dry. The final wagon came after darkness settled. Nora carried a lantern as the driver backed beneath the shed. 3 ranchers had ridden down behind him. They wanted to inspect the remaining freight themselves. Caleb loosened the ropes. Nora lifted the first sectional panel. A sack of flour sat beneath it. Dry. She opened the second. Tools wrapped in paper. Dry. The third section held lamp oil, coffee, and 2 boxes of medicine. The cardboard corners were stiff. No water stains. Wallace Pike rubbed the inside of the canvas. "This the same seam you tested on those little squares?" Nora looked toward the workshop wall. "Yes. I want space on the next winter run." "So do I," another rancher said. A third nodded. Caleb glanced at Nora. This time he smiled. "Not much. Enough." Within 2 weeks, 17 families were booking freight in pooled loads. Dodd did not apologize. Nora had never expected him to. Instead, a new notice appeared near the mercantile counter. Customers could purchase supplies without agreeing to Dodd's preferred freight company. He still offered credit. He still charged what he could. But the condition was gone. People had another choice now. That was enough. The first real snow arrived 3 weeks later. Nora was sorting finished work when Caleb entered, carrying a folded sheet of paper. "Got something. If it's another route schedule, put it on the board." "It isn't." He placed the paper beside her scissors. "An employment offer. Steady wages. Year-round work. Her own room in the freight office." Nora read it, then folded it once. "No." Caleb leaned against the table. "That bad? It's fair. Then why no?" "Because I don't want to be your employee forever." He straightened. Nora pulled a second paper from beneath her sewing box. "I want to rent this side of the shed." Caleb took the page. "My canvas work stays mine. Your freight business stays yours. When my covers go on your wagons, we split the loading fee." He read every line. "You wrote terms. You taught me schedules. You were better at those than me. I know. Caleb looked toward the empty loading bay, then back at her. Agreed. He signed. Nora signed beneath him. Only after the papers were folded did Caleb speak again. You staying through spring? Nora looked out at the falling snow. Depends. On? That new awning. Caleb glanced toward the wide canvas waiting beside the loading bay. You think it won't hold? I think we should find out. They carried it outside together. 2 ladders stood beneath the beam. Nora climbed one. Caleb climbed the other. Snow drifted through the open yard while they raised the canvas between them. Nora fastened her corner. Caleb pulled his side tight. Across the broad new awning, white chalk still marked the seam pattern that had once existed only on a scrap hanging above her work table. Neither stood beneath the other's roof. They were building the same one. If you'd like more Wild West stories about people earning trust one hard choice at a time, subscribe and leave a like.